So here's the real question. How do dentists like you, who aren't willing to let insurance dictate how you will run your practice, who want to create incredibly profitable practices without sacrificing your time or sanity, how do you create the strategies to ensure your practice not only survives, but thrives in the 21st century? That's the blaring question, and Dr. Steve Schlintz is here to provide the answers. Welcome to Dental Practice Freedom Radio.
Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Dr. Steve Schlintz, and I want to welcome you back to another episode of Dental Practice Freedom Radio. And today we are going to talk about the 4 essential elements to any successful dental practice. And in fact, any business. And, I published an article on LinkedIn. I've been using LinkedIn more and more recently. And I published an article on LinkedIn on this very same topic, and I figured, well, I might as well record a podcast episode and go a little bit more in depth on these 4 elements. And this started as a result of me going and really deep diving into business at its core. In the last 10 years, 8 years now, I've been a practice owner for over 7 years. I've launched a coaching company where I have multiple different programs, different offers, different things that I've done. I've helped other people build their online businesses and, really deep dive into sales and marketing and business dynamics and structural dynamics, really. A lot of business stuff out there today is focused on sales and marketing, very important. But there's not as much out there on structural development of a business and structural organization and structural tension and systems dynamics and things that maybe Fortune 500 companies focus on, but not the average entrepreneur as they're starting out. So I was deep diving in all these different concepts and looking at how do I bring this into my dental practice first and foremost, because this is, 6 years ago. I was 2 years into practice, a year into practice really, and was deep diving into everything I possibly could when it came to business development. And I was getting confused because, you'd read one book and it would say something, and then you'd read another book and it would say something else. And one person would say, this is the most important thing you do. And then you read another book and then they said, no, that's totally wrong. This is the most important thing you do. And like most people, I was getting confused. And I said, in order for me to really figure out what makes us successful at this point, I was thinking dental practice. What makes a successful dental practice? Like one that I would envision working in, not like one of these huge mills that does everything, but like something that is highly profitable, allows me to do my best dentistry, allows me to be able to take care of my patients at the highest level. Like what are those core elements that are needed? And I kept studying and eventually, I started to find mentors that thought a little bit differently. And then I started to take their ideas and say, okay, what are the core elements? And I came down to these 4 core elements that I apply to my practice, now apply to my coaching business and my practice. Number 1 is focus. Okay. Now, not just focus in like, I'm going to do something and I'm going to put my head down and focus, but the ability to take all the outside stuff that's going on, which is what I called energy in this article, but it's all this outside stuff, and be able to take everything around me, all my surroundings, and then take all that energy and pinpoint it towards the other 3 elements we're going to talk about. So that's focus. And the actual business system is inputs, the process, and outputs. I had a diagram. So basically, of all this energy, and like a magnifying glass, you focus that energy into inputs, process, and outputs. The inputs are basically what you're putting into the system. So this is the system of business. So I'm focusing all this energy, I'm directing it towards the inputs into the business or the practice, right? These could be your new patients, this could be your team members, like the inputs into the business. And let's just focus on new patients, for example. I know I need really good quality inputs to get really good quality outputs. The saying garbage in, garbage out You may have heard that. That's basically describing if you put crappy inputs into your business system, you're going to get crappy outputs. Dentists talk a lot about this. Like, people will call up in your office and be like, hey, what's the cost of a crown? What's the cost of a filling? What's this? What's that? What's this? What's that? They're price shoppers. They almost never lead to good quality patients on the back end. Sometimes they do if the process is really good, but usually those inputs lead to bad outputs. And then those bad outputs come back and actually reinforce more bad inputs. So you got to be very selective on the inputs you put into your business. So the second element was the process. So we've now focused, well, the third element really is the process. The first element was focusing outside energy towards a common defined goal in your business and putting it towards the inputs. Then you have the inputs themselves. How are you putting inputs into the system of your practice? For example, your new patients. Then the process. And that's like the system for how you do what you do. So let's say you're a TMJ-based dentist. You have a process to be able to take patients from pain to out of pain. That's your process. You have a new patient process, right? You have a team onboarding process. Those are all a sequence of steps that go from input to output. That's the process. And so I was, joking. It's kind of like, I think when you watch Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, like they have these magic machines. I can't remember if it was the never-ending gobstopper or what it was, but like you have all these raw ingredients on the one side, and then it goes into the machine is like, and then it comes out and it's like a gobstopper. That machine is the process. It's the sequence of steps to turn the raw goods into the finished product. And so, my flagship program, Dental Sales Secrets, is built on the new patient process and case acceptance. And I believe the new patient process is the most important thing you do in your practice. So I focused the majority of my attention on the new patient process. And so now we have the focus, we have inputs, we have a process, and the natural result of these things is an output. Now, we really can't change our outputs necessarily in business without changing our input or our process. So you might be saying, like, the output is the logical conclusion of a good quality input and a good quality process. But what's important about outputs is that you can measure them definably. So if I have a new patient that comes in and they're a TMJ, TMD-based patient, I should be able to take that patient, go through the process, and the output is that they move forward towards more comprehensive care. That's the output or the result that I want. And if I get that result, then I know that my input, my process was good. If I don't get that result, my input and my process probably can be improved. Now, the key is with outputs or results, you have to be able to measure them objectifiably and then bring that information back to improve your input or your process. So there's a feedback loop that goes on. And the better you can measure the output, the more you're going to be able to change your input and your process. Most people don't measure output, so they can't even begin to change the input or the process. And they actually try to focus on changing the output. You can't change the output. You can only change the input and the process. And that's a big one because most people are always trying to change the result of something without changing the inputs and the process that lead to the result. And this isn't just in business. This is actually personal life. So when I was, coaching exclusively on mindset a few years ago, that's all I would do. I'd focus on mindset. And I worked with Bob Proctor. And Bob had a diagram that came from Thurman Fleet, who was a chiropractor in San Antonio, Texas in like 1934 or something like that. And he said, we have an image that we have to work with, which is the stick person, and that shows how our mind works. And part of the stick person diagram is you have a thinking part of your mind, you have an emotional part of your mind, and you have an instrument, which is your body. And whatever's going on in the thinking part of your mind leads into the subconscious part of your mind, which leads to the emotional state, which leads to the body taking an action, which leads to a result. And most people try to change the result without changing the underlying emotional state that creates the result. And so in order for you to change a result, you have to change your emotional involvement. That's going to put you into a different vibration, and you're going to get a different result. Your business functions the same way. You can actually think of the stick person as your business. We're trying to change potentially a result, which is more case acceptance, but we don't change the internal state of the business, which is the mindset of the business, right? Which is the stuff we put into the business, the inputs, and the process. So we don't get a different result. We actually get more of the same. And then it reinforces that belief that we can't get what we want, and it actually makes it worse. So that's the feedback. So we need to be able to measure the result that we're getting and say, okay, is it what I want or is it not what I want? If it's not what I want, how do I change the inputs in the process to get a different result? And then you constantly modify. These are the 4 elements of any successful business. These are the 4 elements of any successful dental practice. These are the 4 elements of any successful, high-functioning human being. They all do the same thing. It's a framework to work from. We focus our energy on a business. The more you focus on a potential pain point for a potential client, the more successful you'll be, especially when you're starting. How do we solve that pain point? And then how do we bring people into our system and then get them on a path to get a desired result? That's especially what I'm doing in my dental practice, and that's definitely what I'm doing in my coaching business. The process is exactly the same. In fact, I would say it's even more refined for my coaching business because I know exactly who it is that I'm trying to serve in the dental community, how I serve them with my process, and the result they should be getting as a result of everything that it is that I do. If I'm taking, entrepreneurs through that process as well, and maybe they're doing course creation or something along those lines, I'm doing the same thing. So I want you to be thinking about this in your own practice. Do I have those 4 elements in place? Are they clearly defined? Do I know what I'm trying to achieve? And if the answer is no, I can guarantee you may be making some money, but you're not nearly as profitable as you could be. I highly recommend you think about putting these 4 key elements in your dental practice. You'll be amazed at the results that you get. As always, I hope you got value out of this podcast episode. If you can leave me a review or a rating, that would be greatly appreciated. It helps me spread my message out to more dentists who are needing this. If you are ready to start to put these 4 elements into your practice on a much more consistent basis, I encourage you to book a survey. I'm going to put the survey link up. I'm actually looking for select dentists that are moving from what I consider the old model, which is a lot of insurance-based, PPO-based dentistry, into the new model, which is more fee-for-service, more customer result-oriented type of dentistry. I'm looking for dentists that want to make that switch, that want to excel in their practice. And so if you think you're a good candidate for that, I'd love to talk to you and see if there's something we can do to help you further. You can fill out that survey in the bio on this podcast episode. It'll take you to a scheduling page where you can actually set up a 45-minute strategy session with me so we can deep dive into your dental practice and see how I can best help you. And with that being said, you guys take care. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you at the next episode.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode on Dental Practice Freedom Radio with Dr. Steve Schlitz. We'll see you on the next episode.